So you're interested in knowing how to improve your fat loss progress. So if you maybe only dropping half a pound at the minute, or maybe even a pound a week, or maybe you're even struggling to see any progress, I'm going to walk you through how to improve that rate of progress when it comes to fat loss in this video. If you do find the video helpful, please do drop a like. If you have any questions throughout, throw them down below. And if you haven't already, please do go ahead and subscribe, because it helps me out a ton, and you can keep up to date with future videos which are going to help you with your goals. Okay, before we get into the main steps to help improve the rate of your fat loss, let's quickly understand what creates a fat loss response, and that is a calorie deficit. So you need to be taking in less food or less calories than you are expending. We need to understand that vital condition that we have to make sure we are achieving, because without that we will not drop body fat. Now, let's say we've achieved that calorie deficit, we are seeing some progress, but we want to improve it. If you're in a position where you're not seeing any progress, then you're not in a calorie deficit, and that's the main thing you need to focus on and achieve first. But let's say we are, but we want to improve that progress. What do? The number one thing we want to do is double check our consistency. Okay, so we want to make sure that we are being as consistent as possible with the factors that are determining our calorie deficit. So that is likely going to be our calorie intake, so our food intake. How consistent are we being with our food intake? If we're tracking calories, for example, that's going to help us, to understand how consistent we're being. Okay, how consistent is our calorie intake from day to day, or on average across a week, from week to week? If we're not tracking calories and we're eating in certain windows, or we're following certain portion sizes, it's making sure that the amount we're taking in from a day-to-day or week-to-week basis is consistent. When we look at expenditure, how many steps are we hitting day-to-day across the week on average? And is that consistent? When it comes to other forms of expenditure, such as training, how many times a week are we training? Is that number consistent? How much volume are we doing in those sessions? Is that consistent? And the reason why consistency is so key is, one, if we're not being consistent and this is fluctuating day to day, or week to week, what do you think our progress is going to do? Our progress is going to do the exact same thing. If one day our food intake, our expenditure's on point, we might get a good £2 a loss, or maybe even £1 a week loss, which is still decent rates. But let's say then one week our consistency with intake and expenditure is missing, is lacking. That week we might get only £0.5 a loss a week, or we might get no loss. And if we're not double checking and being aware of our consistency, then that can bring issues with the progress that we're seeing. So consistency is huge, and I'd make sure you are being as consistent as you can with expenditure, with intake, okay? Because then leading on to the second point, that is also then going to help you adjust things when you need to, if you're wanting to increase this rate of progress when you double check consistency is on point. Okay, so if consistency is on point, you're happy with the fact that you're being consistent, but your progress still isn't fast enough, we're going to go on to now what you need to do and what you need to adjust to get the response and the improvement in progression. But we have to still be making sure we're consistent, because consistency is going to allow us to make these fine-tune adjustments. Okay, so number two, like I just said, we need to make adjustments, we need to adjust the deficit. Okay, the rate of progress that you see, progress in this instance being obviously the amount of body fat you're dropping, the amount of weight you're losing, is going to come down to the size of the deficit, right? So the bigger the size of the deficit, the quicker you're going to drop body fat, lose weight. So if your current rate of progress is £0.5 a week, £1 a week, and you're not happy with that, you want to improve it, you want to go to £2 a week, £3 a week, you're going to need to adjust and increase the size of that deficit, right? So what that then comes down to is you identifying which factors out of intake and expenditure you can adjust and is going to work for you. So, can you reduce intake and or increase expenditure? Okay, if you're looking at your food intake now and you're struggling with hunger, you're already not eating that much. Okay, it might not then be the best idea to reduce food intake further. You might find that too difficult to maintain and be consistent with, and then it might just end up backfiring and not working out. So your option then might be to, okay, I'm going to increase expenditure. Okay, I'm going to take steps up each day. I'm going to maybe add another training session. However, on the flip side, if you're looking at expenditure and you're thinking, I just can't take expenditure up, I haven't got the time to add another session in, to add an extra 2,000 steps a day, then you might look at food and go, okay, well, I can drop food. Hunger's not bad. I feel like I'm eating enough. I can drop food a little bit to create that bigger deficit. So you need to identify what adjustments you can make that's going to work for you. And then lastly, make sure the adjustments you do make are small. Okay? Now, the main reason for this being is when you do make adjustments and you increase the size of your deficit, the bigger the deficit, the harder it is going to be to maintain. Okay, because the bigger the deficit, the more likely hunger is going to be harder to manage, the more likely energy might take a hit, your mood might take a hit. The longer you're in a deficit and the bigger the deficit, harder things get. So number one, make small adjustments, because we don't want to necessarily create a huge deficit. To go from £1 a week to £2 a week loss, you're not going to need to increase the size of that deficit by a massive amount. So make small adjustments so you can easily manage and maintain that new deficit. Secondly, you have to understand that to get to your end goal might take a long time. Okay, so we don't want to use all the tools that we have available to us to get to our end goal and to make and to adjust the size of the deficit. Okay, so the tools being reducing food intake, increasing steps, adding a training session, adding training volume, and so forth. We don't want to use those tools too quickly that we then run out of tools to be able to use later down the line. Okay, and if we make big adjustments, we're essentially using a lot more of these tools. So make small adjustments so we're only using a few tools at a time, which is then also going to help the longevity of our goal. So there you have it. There's a simple way of improving the progress of your fat loss. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please do drop a like. If you have any questions or have any questions throughout this video, throw them down below in the comments. I'll get back to you. And if you haven't already, please do go ahead and subscribe. I'll catch you on the next one.